This is The Efficiency Point, a podcast from Modern Pumping Today magazine. I'm your host, MPT editor Jay Campbell, along with our producer Richard Council. You can find us online at mptmag.com and on any of your favorite podcast apps. While you're there, please rate, review, and subscribe. It really does help more listeners find the show. On this episode, we speak with Dr. Lynn Broaddus, the founder of Broadview Collaborative and the incoming president of the Water Environment Federation. She's dedicated her career to building a sustainable water future, and I think you'll enjoy our discussion. We also preview the November issue of MPT, but first, some headlines. As you might expect, our top story on this episode is the California wildfires. California is still experiencing massive wildfires that have displaced thousands of people. According to the Associated Press, the Getty Fire and the Kincaid Fire have evacuated more than 140,000 people as of this recording. The National Weather Service estimates that 21 million Californians are in extreme fire danger. Of California's 58 counties, 43 are experiencing near historic wind events, with winds up to 80 miles an hour in Southern California. The fires so far have consumed over 650 acres and is only 15% contained. Richard, have you been able to see any of the California wildfire coverage on the news this past week?
Yeah, it's pretty bad. And it just seems like they can't catch a break, especially with all the new winds and the new lines coming down and starting new fires. And it's just seems like they're having a lot of trouble. So hopefully they can get it under control soon.
Yeah, these wildfires are becoming they're becoming annual events in California, and they just seem to be getting larger and larger.
Yeah, that's right.
The wildfires, as you probably have been watching on the news, are on the rise due to climate conditions in California, but also outdated infrastructure, and that's probably something of direct interest to our listeners. California's electrical utility, Pacific Gas and Electric, also known as PG&E, has come under intense scrutiny during this latest round of fires. Its downed power lines have been cited as a major contribution to the wildfires. The company has initiated statewide rolling blackouts to try and stave off further ignitions due to failed lines, and the fund that it set up due to a class action suit for the 2017 and 2018 wildfires has been reduced somewhat due to PG&E declaring bankruptcy protection recently. According to the U.S. Geological Survey, wildfires compromise water quality both during active burning and for months and years after the fire has been contained. Stay tuned later in the show when we hear from WEF's President-elect Lynn Broaddus on pathways to a sustainable water future, where some of those concerns will be addressed. And more positive news, if you attended the 2019 Turbo Machinery and Pump Symposia in Houston this fall and wondered who you saw there, I have some good news for you. Texas A&M's Turbo Lab has released the TPS 2019 post-event profile with a breakdown of attendees and industries that were at the show. According to Texas A&M, over 4,800 verified attendees came to this year's event, with 51 countries represented. As you'd likely expect, the top country in attendance by population was, of course, America, with 4,300. But we had attendees coming as far away as Uganda, New Zealand, and Australia. So that's a long trip. God, Richard, can you imagine taking the flight from Australia to Houston, Texas?
Well, I'll tell you, the flight I took to Greece was a solid 10 hours. So, and I'll tell you what, that was not a fun plane ride. So, and I can only imagine how they feel going all the way from the bottom side of the world. So,
well, now, what pump conference did you attend in Greece, Richard?
It had everything to do with my anniversary, so we kind of wanted to keep it pretty simple. But okay. It was a fun time.
See, I thought people only traveled because they wanted to attend educational pump events.
Well, of course, and that's why I was disappointed.
Yeah. Well, that's okay. Keep your chin up, Richard, because mark your calendar for September 15th and 17th of 2020, because that's when next year's TPS event is scheduled. The short courses will begin on September 14th. If you're listening to this and want more information about how to register to attend next year's Turbo Machinery and Pump Symposia, information can be found at Texas A&M's Turbo Lab website, tps.tamu.edu. That's tps.tamu.edu. Our next news item will be of interest for our listeners in the Pacific Northwest. The Hydraulic Institute, through its Pump Systems Matter program, is offering a Pump Systems Assessment Professional Certification Prep course on November 12th through 14th in Seattle. a Pump Systems Assessment Professional, or PSAP, certification. Provides third-party validation for an individual's proficiency in pump fundamentals, pump system optimization, and implementation of pump system assets. For those wanting to become PSAP certified, this 2.5-day course will better prepare you to take the challenging PSAP certification exam, and there's also an opportunity to sit for the PSAP exam after the course is completed for an additional fee. Hydraulic Institute members and standard partners will receive a 25% discount on both the prep course and the subsequent exam. For inquiries regarding the PSAP prep course and pricing, contact the Hydraulic Institute's Peter Gaydon at pgaydon@pumps.org or call 862-242-5679, 862-242-5679, and we'll include that information in the show description. Dr. Lynn Broaddus is the founder of the Broadview Collaborative, an organization focused on sustainable and reliable water systems and services with a particular interest in water utilities, resource recovery, distributed infrastructure, social equity, and collaborative processes. She's also a board member and president-elect of the Water Environment Federation, and we're pleased to have her as our guest today. How are you doing, Lynn?
I'm great, and it's wonderful to talk with you again.
Lynn, how did you get involved in water sustainability and resource recovery?
Oh, gosh. I mean, I think it kind of goes back to the basic roots of who I am as a person. I certainly grew up, as a Girl Scout and among a family of gardeners and things like that had me outside and loving nature and growing up, cutting my teeth on the first Earth Day back in 1970. All those things are sort of part of my DNA. And then in college, I became very interested in what today we might call kind of closed loop systems, but I don't think we used the term back then. And then, that kind of carried through my career in a couple of different ways. But I really kind of landed on water very accidentally. My family had moved to Milwaukee, Wisconsin in 2000. And the job that I had, I enjoyed with the Nature Conservancy, but I eventually felt like I needed to find something more local so that I could become part of that Milwaukee community, and rather than just being a virtual employee from back at the home office. And what happened was I became the executive director of Milwaukee Riverkeeper, and I immediately felt a connection. Once it was almost like having a new child. I thought, oh my gosh, what is this river? What is this organization that I need to get to know? And once I dove in, I just felt such a connection because, not just because it's water for water's sake, but because of the way that U.S. laws work. Water belongs to the people. It's a very, it's democracy with a small d, and being able to be the voice of people thinking about what they wanted for their water and how they could connect to it and how they could protect it and restore it resonated with me in a way that I knew I had come home. And that was kind of the way I got started. And it seems like a long time ago now. But
that's a great way to look at it. And it also kind of touches on one of the challenges of talking about the water crisis today. A lot of people don't really understand what we mean when we say we have a water crisis or a potential water shortage, because they don't think of water as a non-renewable resource like oil or gas.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting you say that, because I was just recently on a panel with some people from the power and renewable energy sector, and they were talking about a lot of the changes and especially legal and regulatory matters, as well as kind of investment issues in those sectors. And it was so different than in the water sector, in part because we forget that, I think a lot of people forget that water isn't just a commodity that we use to flush our toilets and quench our thirst and grow our plants. We use it in so many ways. Water's used for transportation. Water's used for cityscapes and landscapes. Water's used for wildlife. And we have to think about it in a whole different way. And when we use it for one thing, depending on how we treat it, we can have really negative consequences for other aspects of our environment and our communities. I remember one time, a long time ago, one of my friends in grad school was running her tap in the kitchen, washing dishes and just letting it run and run. And I said, you should turn it off. And she said, why do you worry about water? Because she saw that it was constantly being recycled. The water went through the pipes and goes back to the river. But depending on how we use it, there's energy embedded in that water. There are pollutants that we add when we use the water, depending on how we treat it and how we use it. We really do have to be very thoughtful and careful about how we use the water, so that there is enough for everybody.
Yeah, excuse me, your classmates should have listened to some more soul music. You don't miss the water until the well runs dry.
That's right.
Well, since you've been involved with WIF for so many years, how do you see those concerns taking place and taking an influence into the domestic water market?
Well, it's sort of interesting. I think that for a long time in the U.S., certainly if we think kind of back to the 70s and 80s, in the early days of the Clean Water Act, the emphasis was so much on cleaning up some very serious and egregious sources of pollution that were really marring our landscapes and quality of life in our communities. And so that was the focus, upgrading wastewater treatment plants and other point sources of pollution so that we could clean up our waterways. And that has been a great success. And I think during that time period, the professional members who might have associated what was with WEF, or it's went by other names in earlier days, but what is now WEF, we're really focused on, how to build it, making sure people knew how to operate it, making sure that permits were met, making sure that the fees were collected appropriately to support the infrastructure, all that sort of stuff. And then, things kind of cooked along for the next 2 or 3 decades as water quality expectations ratcheted down, and so adjustments needed to be made and upgrades needed to be made. But for the most part, the utility operators and leaders wanted to keep a low profile. If things were going wrong, that's when the public knew about them, and they wanted things to go right, and for the public not to really have to think about it too much. But fast forward to, I'd say, the last 8, 10, 20 years, we're starting to see a shift in how utilities and water providers operate in our communities, really seeing the kind of multiple benefits that we can provide to communities depending on how water is handled, rather than just trying to build our way out of water challenges, as we have increased stormwater challenges, increased non-point runoff challenges, growing expectations, heightened expectations for how much phosphorus and nitrogen we can get out of our water. Wondering what are we going to do with the waste products from our water, how to turn them into useful products rather than waste products that have to be landfilled. Wastewater utilities really started to shift and think about resource recovery. That means recovering not just the clean water from our sewage stream, but also how to recover energy. There's a lot of energy embedded in our sewage, enough that potentially every what we tend to call wastewater treatment plants in the business, we like to call them water resource recovery facilities. But what each one of these facilities could hopefully become energy neutral, capturing enough energy from the both the heat and the by generating biogas from the carbon compounds in that sewage, to be able to operate their facilities.
We're seeing some of that already today in food processing and agriculture, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And there's a convergence between municipal wastewater and the food sector and the food manufacturing sector, both from the agricultural side as well as, those who are making our cookies and our hot dogs and our cheeses. There's so much energy embedded in the waste from those processes, and they can either treat that right there on site or send it to their municipal facility. But either way, it's basically the same set of processes that are being used. But there's so much energy and so many nutrients in those byproducts that it's really a crime to throw them away. We need to be capturing them and using them for beneficial purposes.
So there's been a big shift in our attention to water, shifting away from solely on pollution and purification to resource recovery and repurposing, hasn't there?
It really has been, and it's a really exciting time to be in the water sector. There was a time where it was considered to be maybe the sleepy part of our utilities, primarily because there was so much concern around compliance. And obviously compliance is, with the Clean Water Act and the Safe Drinking Water Act, those are still very important. But we're going beyond those now and really trying to think about their role in sustainability. When, using water, moving water, treating water is a big part of our energy portfolio in the U.S. It takes a lot of energy to provide those services. And if we can slice that back, maybe even get it to zero, then at least zero in terms of net energy use, then we're really making a big contribution to the global climate concerns.
And unlike a lot of resources, water really is part of a global ecosystem. So how do you see the domestic concerns that we're having in our industry and focused on water applying worldwide?
Well, I think it goes both ways. We have things that we can learn from other countries, and other countries have things that they can learn from us. Certainly, I think we're used to thinking of exporting our technologies and exporting our know-how, and certainly we do a lot of training of the world's engineers here in this country and should be very proud of that. We also have a lot to learn from what's going on in other countries. Certainly, resource recovery has generally been a bit ahead of things in Europe and Western Europe, and so they sometimes set the pace for what and we can learn from things that they're doing, and that's definitely true of phosphorus recovery. Germany in particular has more stringent limits than most places in the U.S., and so they're moving ahead with that fairly aggressively. But also, when we think of developing countries and countries that may have sanitation that is not up to what most people have come to expect in the United States, there's a lot of work, especially being catalyzed by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, to find sustainable sanitation practices and technologies that can operate not only have the technology to be able to operate, but also the sort of social and business structures that will allow them to operate. And the focus of that research is in not just providing the sanitation, but doing it in a way that uses little to no external water and little to no external energy input, and to do it inexpensively. You can do it if you're on the rocket ship, but that's a really expensive way to do it. How can we do it in communities that don't have a lot of extra cash sitting around, have a lot of other things they're trying to juggle, so they're not going to have PhD engineers in their community running their sanitation. While the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation research and the researchers that are being supported by them are primarily focused in developing countries, what gets developed there will be very useful back here in the U.S. We have plenty of communities in the United States that are struggling to have what we consider to be kind of standard sanitation. But even beyond those rural communities that could use kind of the same technology that is being developed in other countries. Some of that will also come back and probably inform how we can build our cities to use less water, less energy, potentially kind of quasi off-grid, if you will. And it may really start to shake up the way that we see how our central utilities are designed and operated. Now that's kind of looking way down the pike, but if you're really trying to look far into the future, I think those are the kinds of things we can expect.
It's an exciting time, isn't it?
It is. It really is. I guess some people may consider that to be scary, the unknown to be scary, but I think it's exciting.
If our listeners wanted to find out more information, where can they find you online?
They can find me at L. Broaddus at broadviewcollaborative.com. That's LBROADDUS at broadviewcollaborative.com, or at my URL, which is just broadviewcollaborative.com. That's my website, and I always welcome input and questions from others. That's
Lynn,
how I learn.
Lynn, thank you so much for taking time to talk with us today.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. Thanks so much.
And we'll see you at the next WEFTEC.
You bet. In New Orleans in 2020.
Laissez bon temps rouler. Take care.
Okay. Bye-bye.
For our stateside listeners, November is time for turkey dinner with the family and watching football all day. Richard, is your family a turkey family, or are they a ham family come Thanksgiving time?
We are a turkey and ham, but it's got to be country ham. It can't be city ham because we make it a certain way where you got to do the brown sugar, and it's really sweet and salty at the same time. So,
is it one of those hams that's cooked in Dr. Pepper?
No, I've literally never heard of that.
What about have you ever seen the deep fried turkeys?
No, that's actually delicious. My dad makes a fantastic deep fried turkey.
Yeah, just remember to thaw that turkey first before you drop it in the fryer. Otherwise, you get a rocket ship turkey.
Yeah, as long as you do it outside, though, I think you're okay.
Have you seen the videos of people launching their turkeys into space because they accidentally put a frozen turkey into the fryer?
Are we sure it was accidental?
Well, maybe the ones that end up in the emergency room, I think those are accidents. Well, anyone else may just be looking for a YouTube celebrity.
Well, I don't know, because I've ended up in the hospital for not accidentally shooting my friends and them shooting me with bottle rockets. So it could have just been on purpose, and it was just a bad accident.
And that's why fireworks are limited to New Year's and 4th of July.
That's true.
No Thanksgiving fireworks.
That's right.
Well, if you're a longtime subscriber to MPT, then you know November means more than just turkey dinners. It also means MPT's annual Buyer's Guide is here. We're putting the finishing touches on the 2020 MPT Buyer's Guide, which is slated to be our biggest issue of the year. Inside, you'll find profiles of the pump industry's leading and most established companies, as well as a few new faces that will be making a name for themselves in the coming year. If you're not a current subscriber, there's still time to sign up for a free 12-month subscription, starting with our special November issue by visiting mptmag.com and clicking the subscribe tab. This has been The Efficiency Point, a podcast from MPT Magazine. Follow us on Twitter at ModPumpMag for updates on our next episode. Today's episode was produced by Richard Council. Until next time, I'm your host, Jay Campbell. Thank you for listening.